Joining me today in our latest episode of Meet the Team is Mr. John Reid,
Hey,
and
Val.
his title is head of brand, head of that's it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that means you're in charge of like marketing and public relations things, and what else? I mean, that's not just a little bit of work. That's a lot of work. So
Yeah,
what's your day
definitely.
to day?
Right. Yeah, yeah. And I split duties with Chris. I'd say he's a little more tech focused. I work on more of the storytelling stuff. But Brand, it's a lot to do. It includes, marketing, advertising, and kind of like everything that any internal marketing group would do, plus everything else.
And like I said, that's not a small feat. I remember, I pride myself on having pretty good writing skills. And we were collaborating on something once, and I had just written a rough draft, and you came in and you very quickly tightened it up. And it reminded me of a boss that I had before who I had spent all this time writing this beautiful ad, and he came in and just chop, 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 chop. And I said, "You're crushing my creativity." And he said, "No, I'm making it better." And
Mm,
he was right. You don't want it to be too flowy and too many words. You have to really distill it down. And that's an art form that until you've
sure.
had to do it, people don't really know. When you see like this delightful little 1 or 2 sentence ad, you don't realize how long it took somebody to bring that down to those 1 or 2 sentences.
Yep, it's true. I mean, that's really the job a lot of the time is, no one cares. You got to remember that all the time. It's like no one wants to read what you're writing, and like simplicity is king. Like the more simple things are, the better they are. I think, and that really comes from empathy. I mean, that's a big deal in what we do as well. Is we have to have a lot of empathy for our audience. So that means making things as easy and digestible as humanly possible. So yeah.
So when you were a little kid, I've been around a lot of little kids. I've raised some children. I've never heard a kindergartner say, "When I grow up, I want to write ads. I want to be a
Hmm.
marketing person." So how did that all evolve? Were you always creative? Did you have adults in your life who recognized that and kind of nurtured that in you and helped guide you in that direction? Or did you just wake up one day and say, "Well, I'm never going to have a career doing basket weaving. I need to find like a real job"?
Yeah, I mean, basket weaving remains a hobby for me, of course. Um, what's funny is like I remember when I was in fourth grade, everyone we had to do like an ad or a commercial, and they videotaped it on like the giant VHS thing, um, and the ad I made for this product I invented was called Turbulent Towels, and if that videotape ever surfaced, it would be awful. Um, but yeah, it really came down in like when I was in college. I was an English major. I realized I didn't want to go to law school, and I was like, all right, now what do I do? And it's basically like my dad was just like, all right, you can either go into business or communications advertising. And I looked at them both, and advertising had less math, and so that's what I did. And then it worked. We went from there.
So, and talk a little bit about college. Um, I know that there are people, young people in the world, or even, older people who thought, okay, full disclosure here. I have a GED. All right. Like
Hmm.
I left high school. I finished 10th grade and got my GED. I started college the year that would have been my senior year in high school, and it just
Hmm.
wasn't for me. So it is for some people. It's not for others. Some jobs don't require you to have a degree. In a lot of cases, it's better if you do. So, what were some of the benefits for you from what you learned in college that you use today, where you would say, yeah, if this is a field you want to pursue, I highly recommend that you take these classes, learn these things?
It's kind of a mix because I don't know that I necessarily would. I mean, I really like this idea that people are starting to have that, like, maybe the sort of return on investment of a degree is like kind of starting to not be worth it. And I don't think it'd be a great idea to not go to college if you didn't have like something else set up, you know. I think that liberal arts education, I think that's really good. I think it's really important. I think it's great for cultural context, you know. So like we're all, and I think it's great so that you learn to think. You know, I think that's a big thing that happens in college. And like a lot of the stuff in the college programs, like is very practical. And this career is really practical. And like people start to feel too much like they're artists, or like, oh, my creativity is not happening today. It's like, like we are. I mean, this is like the most blue collar creativity you can find. Right? I just describe it as like you just keep turning the crank and turning the crank, and a bunch of ideas come out, and every so often there's a good one in there, and you hold that and just keep going. We had a guy who worked for us at our last agency who didn't go to college. Like, he walked across Spain instead. And he was like, oh, I got to get a college degree. I'm like, no, man, you're doing it already. Like, you have the job. Just keep going, So I don't know. I wouldn't tell someone not to go to college, but I do think it's a really interesting discussion to have right now.
Right, because I mean, it's a big expense, but in a lot of cases, it's worth the expense, and in some cases, it's not.
Right.
So,
yeah.
What do you think were some of the most important classes, or some of the most important lessons, or even maybe professors who inspired you and sparked something that you still lean on today? Like, you could save somebody thousands of dollars in tuition if you just give them that little nugget right now.
Yeah, I think it's I don't know if I have that for anyone, but I had a professor when I first met her. She was like, "Oh, it's too late to start this program. Like, I'm just going to go." And I just worked my butt off and made it happen. A lot of this stuff I think you get from it is like thinking of ideas. It's a muscle, so you're just doing push-ups. So every class we were required to have a lot of ideas is really good because you're just doing those push-ups. So I mean, I think that's probably like the main benefit, of a lot of the school programs, and certainly the portfolio schools that you go to afterwards. So that's a really big thing in my industry is there's like 2-year portfolio programs where you do nothing but have all these ideas and pull like a spec book together, and that's kind of how you get a job. So that's I remember when I was like my junior year, I went down to visit one. And I was really like intent on leaving college and just going to start that now, right away. But I'm kind of glad I didn't. And a lot of it was just like the maturity, like when I finally did portfolio school, I think I was in better shape to do a good job at it.
Portfolios are important for a lot of different professions. I used to do just like initial screening of portfolios when I worked at a game company, and I would go to conferences, and we would have artists and people like that come in with portfolios. And sometimes people don't understand. Like, if you are taking your portfolio to a company that you really are interested in working for, kind of edit your portfolio with like things that are relevant to that company, just to show that you've done your research. Can you give some other tips about that?
Fewer better things certainly is key. Nothing that doesn't represent the kind of work you want to do. And I would say as you start showing your book off to different people, if you hear like a reaction from like one person they don't agree with, and just set it aside. But if you hear like 3 people saying the same thing, then I think it's important to take that feedback to heart.
Right. And I mean, like I said, that's applicable to so many different careers. My daughter is a dog groomer. And so she recently put a portfolio together. And like I said,
That's awesome.
Concept artists and graphic artists and, marketing people. So there you go. Get a portfolio together if you want to pursue.
Yeah. I mean, anyone that wants to make their money off their talent, it's like probably got to have it.
Okay. Did you watch Mad Men? Do you remember the show Mad Men?
Yeah.
So Don Draper was the main character in that. He was all suave and everything. He was an advertising guy, and that's why they called them. They were the big advertising guys on Madison Avenue. So that's why they called them Mad Men. So on a scale of 1 being just Gomer Pyle and 10 being Don Draper, where do you put yourself on that scale as far as being
Oh
like
man.
a,
Oh
a
God.
great marketing guy?
I mean, I'm not allowed to say 10, and I don't think in this situation,
You
but
can. Hey, if
I,
you don't advocate for yourself, nobody will.
I did. I asked my wife earlier, just how much I looked like John Hamm on a scale of 1 to 10, and like no hesitation. It's like 1. So I think I'm not like Don Draper in that way. I actually, I liked that show. I didn't really get into it because it is pretty accurate, and at the end of the day, like I don't really want to watch what I just did all day, except the furniture and suits are way better, So didn't totally get into that.
But what about that creative process? Like one of the things that fascinates me, I don't think it was in Mad Men. It was in a movie, I think, with Keanu Reeves, but I can't remember what it was, where he was an
Mm,
advertising guy. And he's trying to come up with an advertising campaign for hot dogs. So he sits and he
mhm,
thinks about all the adjectives that you can use to describe hot dogs. They're plump, they're
mm.
juicy, they're delicious. Do you use that kind of process, or what's your process for coming up with some kind of campaign or like marketing text?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the most important thing is that there's no aha moment. There's no eureka. It is a process, and like I said before, you just got to turn the crank. For me, and I think just my industry in general, when advertising is at its best, it's comes from a really simple human truth, and I think having a lot of empathy for the audience, like I mentioned before, is like really important. So when you're coming from an idea where like what your product is all about, what this brand's all about, intersects with culture and is applicable to your consumer, whoever's going to be into this brand, like that's where the good stuff really comes from.
Is there a particular campaign or something that you did that you were really proud of? Because like I know you guys did a campaign for like Panda Express, and I'm sorry, Panda Express is not a hard sell. I mean, let's admit it; it's delicious. So, but
It's
still,
yep.
to land that, they saw something in you. They're like, yeah, we want this guy. So,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, it was super fun to work on. I've been pretty lucky in my career. I've gotten to work on some pretty cool stuff. So, I got to do Yelp's first TV campaign ever. Strangely, same with Bed Bath and Beyond. I got to do Apple's holiday commercial one time with Stevie Wonder and Andre Day. It was so fun. Like just I've done stuff for Google where I made um, like a map quest kind of game, that turned into something pretty popular. So yeah, like I think for me, it's like I like doing, big video type things, but then also what's really rewarding for me is when you do something, and this happens often, we're doing something more digital where you can see people like enjoying it and people diving into it. And that to me is like when you have an idea and it really gets into culture, I mean, I had one thing I worked on ended up being an answer on Jeopardy, and that's like that to me is like, pretty high praise.
that's super cool. What was that? Like everybody loved Jeopardy.
I mean, this is eons
It
ago,
doesn't
but
matter. I would have that.
yeah,
Like I would have it on a shirt that I would wear everywhere.
I made a meat scented cologne for Burger King. Um, and I won't dive too deep
Yeah.
into it, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean that's super weird, and that's the kind of stuff that works.
Okay. So you did all these things. How did you wind up here working on a crypto game, being one of the architects of play, as we say now? H- How did that happen?
Well, let's see. At the last agency I was working at, I was the chief creative officer. Worked with Chris. He knew Brooks from a past life, and started working on this thing, and we're just like, it was the exact kind of opportunity that he and I were always like dreaming of working on. Like we both love games, we love tech, and like we were working on some stuff that we weren't as into, so having the opportunity to work in something gaming, something really innovative, it's just like a great opportunity. I think a lot of people in my industry at a certain point, they want to take, you get to see like so many different businesses and the gory insides and what they do well, and taking all that that we've learned over the years, and then getting to apply it to something we really care about, like Nor is, it's just a really great opportunity that I'm very grateful for.
So it wasn't a hard sell for you at all. Chris just said, "Hey, you want to come work with me?" And you're like, "Dude, I'm totally there."
You know what? I read the first white paper, that Brooks had done, and I'm like, "Yep, this is going to go for sure." And so, and I met Brooks one time, and he and I were just kind of riffing on stuff, and it was like an immediate click. And so, yeah, that was great. It was just like I knew that we were part of this thing.
I've described him before in a loving way as Ka in the Jungle Book, where you just look into his eyes and like he's talking, and you're just like, okay, yeah, I'm totally there. So he wasn't always like that, but he's like that now.
You know what? You've known him a lot longer than I have, so I don't know if I have.
No, little Brooks.
Yeah,
little Brooks was not like that. So you're talking about how much you love games, and one of the things that we often talk about is D&D, like tabletop RPGs. So I don't see any questions in the YouTube chat, so let's just get our nerd on. So what was your first experience with like tabletop RPGs? Was it D&D or was it something else?
No, man, it was the Red Box for sure. I go all the way back. And that got me into a lot of stuff. That was like one of the first experiences I had where you're like, creating a world from the ground up, and like, how much fun is that? It's a lot, and it wasn't cool back then to be into that. And then, like relatively recently, it just, it became like such a cultural phenomenon. I think I've told this to my daughter. I was like, you don't want to be like interesting in junior high. You want to be interesting when you're 30. That's like, I think that's a key thing. Like, don't peak in 8th grade, kid. It's not a good look. Yeah. But all the tabletop stuff was like, that led me to, I'm coding. That was coding for a MUD, which is like a text-based World of Warcraft. And then WoW came out and I got into that. And, just like seeing how that whole thing kind of progressed. And then there's just like a soul to it when it's down to pen and paper. So like getting back to that, it's been really cool. It's been a good experience.
So what's your favorite tabletop? I'm sorry. We're finished what you've.
No, I mean, that's really been my path into games overall. Just like from that first experience, like all the tabletop stuff and all the board games I play, and like I take that into what I do, where I think like thinking about advertising and brands like a game, like giving people different mechanics and different handles to the brand where they can interact with it. I think that's a really good analogy for how marketing works when it's at its best.
So which has been your favorite tabletop game or RPG?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because I know we've been talking about doing Icewind Dale with just some people on the team. I've never done that. I've done like Warhammer. We were too poor to have all the little cool Warhammer figures, but we played the Warhammer, the Warhammer rule set and D&D, of course. So Icewind Dale, I haven't done that.
I mean, I love all that stuff for sure. And I think it's cool to see all the different people who are into it too, especially when, you get into like an industry where, you're working on games. I was working with Riot at one point, and, everyone in there is into all different kinds of games, so it's a very different experience versus, some of like, some stodgier place you might get to work at some point. So
yeah, there are conversations we have at work that other people in other companies would probably get fired for. And that's why I love it.
100%.
So
Yep.
What's your go-to character type?
Oh yeah.
What do you lean
I don't think I
towards?
have one. I think doing different stuff all the time. I think that's yeah. I like to spread it out, explore.
So if you could have a skill or a weapon or a spell that your one of your favorite characters had, if you could have that in your real life, what would you want?
I mean the correct answer to this is teleportation. It's like being able to skip air travel as a thing, certainly, and I've actually had this as an interview question before, and just like without hesitation, it's teleportation for sure.
See,
Because I mean,
I'm
we could have lunch, Val. Like zip over to a pier in Texas, and we'd be eating torchies before you knew
you
it.
may not want to have lunch with me when you hear that. Mine would be power word kill. Like I
Ooh,
would love that. So what does that say about me as a person? That's like okay, all these great weapons, have all these great spells, power word kill.
that's
Yeah.
it. All right, fair enough.
Uh, okay, so back to the marketing and advertising stuff. What companies
Mhm.
do you think are really doing it well now? Like one of the ones that I love, like Mini was doing some great ads for a while. I haven't seen
Yeah,
any cool stuff from them lately, but I always liked the Mini ads. So, like, what are some of the ones you're like,
right.
oh,
Yeah.
I wish I was part of that?
I mean, that's so for sure. And actually, I worked at like both agencies that had that business over like a 10-year stretch. I never actually worked on the business, but they're always doing such fun, cool stuff. Because like the soul of that brand was really clear. I mean, it had like the heritage of the cars and what they were all about, and just like being small when you're at odds with culture. And in the early days, it was huge SUVs. That kind of makes it easy in a way to to advertise that thing. Right now, I just saw this great film from Samsung, and they're launching a new phone, and it folds. And talking to people who just like can't get out of this like iPhone rut, and it's all about this woman who's like, everything that folds is like catching her attention, like books and seats and all these other things. And she's like, but I can't do this. I always had an iPhone. So I think them just like calling out that kind of cultural phenomenon of like once people get into that family, they can't break out of it, and like kind of calling people on the carpet for that is really cool.
What books or shows, movies, authors would you recommend to people who want to learn more about marketing and branding and advertising?
Yeah, there's so many. I should just go on the shelf and start pulling a bunch out. I think all books, in general. I think to do this, you need to be really curious, and that's actually like a question I usually ask in an interview is like, what's the last thing you taught yourself? It's like curiosity like really carries the day. And you need to be super curious to be into this. I think it's such a practical thing. I think there's like a lot of books um, where we can learn a lot about marketing stuff, but like just the ideation, I think just like doing those push-ups. So I think those, portfolio schools are particularly great at that. It's just like getting you to do this process over and over and over again. And like that's just how you learn. I wish there was like a shortcut, but there's just not. I always liked, there's a book called Hey Whipple Squeeze This, and it's just about this one guy's journey through the industry, and it has like so much good
Now, the
advice
younger
in it.
kids aren't going to know who Mr. Whipple was.
I know, that's why I kind of hesitated to bring it up. Yeah, so Mr. Whipple was this advertising icon from the
I think so,
70s,
yeah.
60s. Yeah, oof. And it was all about this creative directors like just despised Whipple, and
He was
thought about
in
shooting.
Charmin commercials. It was "Don't squeeze the Charmin." Like Mr. Whipple would
Yes,
catch people squeezing the
oof.
Charmin in the store.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think that's a really great book to learn about. Excuse me, the just like the culture on advertising and just like how to get going and like what you need to know.
No, do
And
you
then my forthcoming. in the next 5 years or so, I think will be a good one
Do
too.
you walk through the store and come up with like slogans, or like you see a box and think, I would do this different? Can you turn that off,
Oh
or does
yeah.
it happen constantly?
Yeah, it ruins everything. I rewrite everything I see in my head. And I think it's one of those things. It's like if you love movies and you really get into movies, it kind of ruins movies because you start to look at it critically and see like, how do they mess that up, or why do they do this? And it's the same. I think it's the same for everything. And so like having grown up as a writer and getting to like apply that to this business, I definitely rewrite everything I see, which is a horrible curse, and I hate it. But it's also like one of those things where it's like you're looking at stuff and examining it critically, and figuring out how you might do things better. So when you're, when I'm working on stuff myself, like that hopefully helps.
We did have a question from the YouTube audience. What's the difference between
Mm-hmm.
working for a crypto NFT brand and traditional
Mm-hmm.
ones?
Right, traditional brands, sure. I love that we are. This industry is so nascent. It's like just getting going. And I think in like a small part we are like a crypto NFT brand, but I would say like more accurately we're a gaming brand that is putting crypto and NFT technology, excuse me, to work. And I think we have this great new technology, and we're going to see how like using this technology as a paintbrush, how is it going to disrupt like every industry, and I think we're onto something with what it's going to do for gaming. To actually answer the question, anytime you're working on something where it's like no one's heard of it, or no one knows that much about it, if you've been working on it for 6 months, you kind of know what there is to know in a way. If you've been really into it, it's like you have a lot of explaining to do. So when I talk about things being like really simple and like really direct, um, you just have more headwinds on that kind of thing when you have a little bit of explaining to do on technology often, but that's the job, figuring out a way to like really distill it down to the really like meaningful thing that's like really striking for people who are going to get into this. Like that's what I do.
Have you had any surprises? Like you just, came into it expecting one thing and then it was totally something different. Like if you're drinking from a glass and you think it's going to be milk and it's water, and you're just like, oh, it's not that you
Yeah.
hate water. It's just that was unexpected.
Right. Yeah. So that usually happens to me, but not with milk and water. But I have I have been there. I think like early on, I didn't know what to expect in a lot of ways, or I was just like really open to this being like a totally bizarre experience. So um, in that way, less so, but also like I'm just surprised by stuff like every single day, and as we like get our proposition more and more defined, it just gets more and more fun, and but there's a lot of work to do, and like I love our community so much, and like you see it more than anyone else, but like we've been on this ride with like thousands of people of like kind of watching how this thing is progressing, and I think that's to have like people like that involved in something is like I think it's pretty telling that there's something pretty
They
cool
are
going on here.
smarter than your average bear. Like I really enjoy the insights and the questions that we get from them.
Mhm.
And I would rather have a small, tight knit community like what we have than, there are some people who pay for a bunch of people to come into their Discord and follow them. I don't like that
Yeah.
disingenuous stuff. That's just not us.
Well, yeah, definitely. And I tell, all of my clients is like, what you want is engagement. If you have like a zillion followers in any social sphere, I mean, that's just an ego metric. I think what really matters are like that people care about it, people are engaged with it. And we definitely have that. So, a big shout out to our community, like most of whom are smarter than me. So,
They're all smarter than me. I have no illusions about that. They are all smarter
right.
than me. And that's okay.
You know what though? I always want to be the dumbest one in the room. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's, I think it's high praise of the community and the team overall. Whereas I'm always just like, oh my God, everyone here is so smart.
Okay, so as we wrap up, is there anything that I didn't
Mm-hmm.
ask you that you want to talk about? Is there any important message that you want to send?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked to pretty much everything, but I think just for me, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate that community. It's so good, and it's just been so cool being on a ride with all these people, and then just how brilliant this team is. Like I've gotten to work with a lot of smart people, and a lot of really interesting brands, and I think this is like the Consortium 9. This team is like by far the most brilliant group of people that I've gotten to work with. So it's humbling, and it's also like really encouraging. So thanks to everyone.
I'm blessed to be able to do this series because I talk to you guys every day, but it's not conversations. It's just like, hello, do you have this thing I need? What are you doing? And so it's fun for me to get to talk to you guys a little bit more and to introduce you to the community. So you're not just names, you're not just numbers. Somebody figured out that you're number 8. So they put that.
I'm just a giant
just an 8.
Yeah, totally. I wanted to create like a giant 8 behind me, or have like someone in an 8 costume gonna dance in behind us.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me today and for all your insights. And we will see you in the Discords and on the Twitters and all those places.